Good morning, boys. Today we are going to start a new chapter, chapter number 8. The name of the chapter is Fiscal Policy. Now, in this chapter, we have to basically discuss certain topics, certain concepts. So many short concepts are there, short definitions are there, and that's why from this chapter, you will never get any broad question. From this chapter, no 5 marks question comes. It's only short questions comes. So, I'm explaining the concepts, and if you write them, you can easily understand what the things are. So, it will be clear for you. The first thing in this chapter, we will do that is public finance. What is public finance? Now remember one thing, the term public in economics implies government. Public implies government. So public finance implies the finance of the government of any economy. Now, what does the finance mean? Finance implies what are the revenue, that is from what sources a government earns income, government earns revenue, and how the government spends money. All those issues will be discussed under this topic, public finance. So, basically public finance deals with the income and expenditure pattern of the government. This is the issue, this is the topic, this is the main subject matter of public finance. Now, opposite of public finance, that is known as private finance, that is income expenditure pattern of any individual. In our family, we, the earning members, always maintain an income and expenditure copy or income and expenditure pattern. That income and expenditure pattern is known as the private individual or private finance. But when the income and expenditure pattern is done on behalf of the government, it is known as the public finance. So, public finance is different from private finance. Clear? Private finance has got two issues, two division, as I told you. First is government revenue, that is what are the sources from where our government earns income, that is public revenue. Revenue implies income, okay? And another part of it is public expenditure, that is where the government spends money. These two combined is the public finance. Today I will discuss about public revenue, that is the sources from where our government earns income. Now there are two broad sources of the government to earn revenue. First is tax revenue, another is non-tax revenue. What is the meaning of this? What is tax revenue? We all know any government imposes various types of taxes. Income tax is there, GST is there, then sales tax is there, excise duties are there. All these are the sources from where our government earns income. So, those sources are known as tax revenue. Therefore, tax revenue implies the total income collected by the government from different types of taxes in the economy. Now, these tax revenue, these taxes can be divided again into two broad categories, direct tax, indirect tax. Okay. The distinction between direct and indirect we will done in my next class. I am not going today into this. Rather, let me first explain that. So, these are all about the tax revenue. Tax revenue, there are two types. So far, you just know this one. This is enough. Next class, I will explain. Then, opposite of tax revenue, there is non-tax revenue. What do you mean by non-tax revenue? In any economy, the government also earns certain incomes which are not collected from taxes, which are not coming from taxes, other than taxes, the government also earns certain incomes. Those incomes are known as non-tax revenue. Clear? Under this non-tax revenue, what are the points? First, what are the sources from where the government earns income under this? First is different types of fees and fines. If you violate the rule, crossing rule, police takes your fine. That is one source of non-tax. Different types of fees. If you want to take admission in any government school or colleges or universities, you have to pay different fees. These are the incomes of the government. These are not taxes. These are non-tax revenue, non-tax income of the government. So, different types of fees and fines. Clear? The second one, it is the profits of the public sector units. We know, for example, in our country, there are so many government companies. The profit of those government companies goes to whom? Goes to government. So, the profits of different public sector units, for example, the profit of the ONGC, it is the income of the government. Is it a tax? No, it is a non-tax revenue. So, the profit of the public sector units are also a source of non-tax revenue. Third is the income from railways. We all know railway is under the government of India, under the government control. So, any income from the railway, it goes to the government. It is a non-tax revenue. I will explain these two. Let me first this one. Number 6, grants and gifts. Any kind of grant, aid or gift the government earns from any foreign government or foreign institutions like IMF, World Bank, these are included here. They are the income of the government. Those are not tax. Those are non-tax revenue of the government. Clear? Now I am coming these two most important one. The first one, this is number 4, public debt. I am explaining this. Public debt is also known as public borrowing or government borrowing. What is this? Public debt implies that when the government of any country borrows money, either from the citizens of the country or from any foreign government, then it is known as public debt. I repeat, when the government of any economy borrows money, either from the citizens of the country or from any foreign government, then it is known as public debt. So, there are two sources of public debt. Either you are borrowing money from the citizens of the country. That type of public debt is known as internal public debt. Internal debt. That is, as a government, I am borrowing money from the citizens of my country. They are giving me the money. That is why it is internal public debt. Another is when you are borrowing money from any foreign government or from any foreign institutions like IMF, World Bank, then it is not internal. Then it is external public debt. Then it is external debt. Okay. So, these are the two types of public debt, internal, external. In case of internal debt, the government borrows money from the citizens of the country and it is repaid in terms of the domestic currency. I have taken the money in terms of rupees, I am repaying it in terms of rupees in case of internal. But the problem here is, in case of this, the government borrows money from the foreign government, foreign institutions. So repayment is done in terms of foreign exchange, not domestic currency. This is the difference. Okay. Public debt can also be divided into several categories. In this connection, we must discuss one thing, that it is often argued that a public debt always puts a burden on the future generation. Why? Because see, if today our government takes a huge amount of loan, then present generation is enjoying the benefit of that debt. Money has come, so they have enjoyed. But in future, when you have to repay, then the future generation will be affected adversely because they have to repay the money. So that is why some economists argue that a public debt always imposes a burden on the future generation. But modern economists argue that this is wrong. Why this is wrong? Because why public debt is required? Why a government borrows money? A government borrows money for several reasons. For example, the government wants to set up few power plants throughout the country. 10 power plants, 20 power plants. For that, government needs quick money. So that's why the government may borrow. Okay. So in case of those projects, in case of those productive services, when the government borrows money, then how I can say that in future my future generation will be affected? Because in future more income, more employment will be created because of the setup of 10 or 20 power plants. So the future generation are getting higher money, higher employment opportunities. So they should not feel the difficulty in repaying the loan. So that's why it is wrong to say that all public debt creates a burden on the future generation. But at the same time, it is also true that if the public debt is unproductive, that is, you have taken a huge amount of money, but you cannot spend the money properly, you cannot produce any productive service in your economy, then it is 100% true that in future the generation will be affected because no productive thing has been done in your country, no power plant has been set up, you have spent the money, for example, in the flood relief camp only. You spend the money only as a luxury, then obviously that type of public debt is unproductive, not productive. If the public debt is productive, if it is productive, then that public debt cannot create a burden on the future generation. But if it is unproductive, then yes, it is a burden. So from that perspective, again, public debt can be of two types, productive, unproductive. What is the meaning of productive? Productive public debt implies when the total public debt is spent for creating new assets, new capital in the economy. And if with the public debt you cannot create any capital or assets in your economy, it is unproductive public debt. Done? And at the same time, here it is also important, why public debt? Public debt is required, as I told you just now, to improve your infrastructure. Especially in any less developed countries or developing countries like India, the government needs huge money for infrastructure improvement. What do you mean by infrastructure? Our roads, communication system, the power stations, defense, all these are known as combined infrastructure. To improve your infrastructure, government needs huge money. And in these countries, our per capita income is not so high that through tax the government can collect huge money. It is not possible. It is a less developed economy or developing. Our per head income is very low. How many percentage of people in India are paying income tax? Very few. So, government cannot expect to collect huge amount of money through taxes. Government has to depend on public debt. So, that's why for infrastructure improvement, government needs public debt. Secondly, due to any at the time of emergency like war or drought, the government needs money and it is an emergency situation. Here the government cannot demand any extra money from the citizens because all are suffering. So, in that case, the government has to go for public debt. Understood? So, there are various reasons why public debt is required. And this public debt is not always burdensome. It depends how you are spending the money. If you are spending the money in productive purpose, then it is not burdensome for your future generation. Since a productive public debt always leads to higher income, higher employment. So, problem is not there. But if it is unproductive, then yes, it is a burdensome on your future generation. Done? This is the discussion on public debt. The last one here we have not explained, that is deficit financing, another important term. See, deficit financing and public debt are same in the sense that their purpose is same. It is borrowing, it is also borrowing. Public debt is also a borrowing, it is also a borrowing by the government. Both are borrowing by the government. The difference is only in case of source. In case of public debt, just now I told you, it is a borrowing by the government either from the citizens of the country or from any foreign government. Deficit financing is the borrowing by the government from the central bank of the country. I repeat, deficit financing implies borrowing by the government from the central bank of the country. For example, Government of India is borrowing money from RBI, from Reserve Bank. Then it is deficit financing. It is not public debt. Why it is deficit financing? See, when the government borrows money from the central bank, for example, when the Government of India borrows money from the RBI, what the RBI will do? RBI will print new notes to supply government. This method of financing by the government, by the central bank, by printing new notes is known as deficit financing. So, in case of deficit financing, what happens is the central bank of a country supplies the money to the government by printing new notes. As a result of that, the immediate effect of deficit financing is inflation. Why? Because when the central bank is printing new notes and supplying it to the government will get enough amount of money supply, and those extra money, they will not fly in the sky, they will be at our hands. So, we will start buying different types of products in the market. So, the demand for the products will increase in the market, and in the demand chapter I think you have done, when there is an increase in demand, supply cannot increase properly, what the immediate effect? Price will start increasing. This price increase is inflation. Understood? So, the immediate effect of deficit financing is inflation in the economy. Inflation. Inflation implies price rise. Inflation is not so much importantly related to this public debt, but whenever you go for deficit financing, you can't avoid inflation. Inflation is must. So, these two are the basically borrowing by the government. In case of public debt, it borrows money from the citizens or from any foreign government. In case of this, the government borrows money from the central bank of a country. It may or may not pose any burden on the future generation depending on the nature how you were spending the money. The immediate effect of this deficit financing is inflation, because the government spends more money now. The government is getting more money from the RBI. RBI is supplying, printing new notes. As a result of that, inflation is masked. Okay. So, these are the sources of non-tax revenue. In my next class, I will discuss about them in details. Today I have told you only direct, indirect. Next class I will make clear about what is direct tax, what is indirect tax. Clear? Thank you.